Hello and welcome. I'm Dave, and this is a virtual tour of Alaska series in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. I got the Flight Sim the day it came out, hoping it was going to be about half as good as promised. After spending a few days learning how to get an aircraft off the ground and back on the ground, I decided it was twice as good as expected, and I don't even have a top end computer. It's pretty good. This is high graphic settings. I'd like to see ultra, but we're not there just now. Um, what I found flying around Alaska is that this flight sim is so good with respect to the geography and how the textures are done and some of the other fine details that it really feels authentic to me. You can visit remote places, and expect a visual experience that really does approximate reality. I realized that it's even good enough you could almost do a flight seeing tour to places all over the planet. So that's why I'm here. I wanted to do a virtual tour of Alaska, basically circuiting the entire state and stopping in all kinds of neat places along the way. And I thought, since I'm going to do that, I'd like to record it, and maybe if anybody else is interested, they'd like to maybe watch or take some notes to plan their own Flight Simulator 2020 experience. Because this is a flight simulator, there's going to be a fair bit of twiddling with the controls and air traffic interruptions and that sort of thing. But I'll try to keep focused on where we are and where we're heading and what we're seeing. The last thing I really need to point out is that I am not a pilot, and I've clocked all of 30 hours in this flight simulator, and that's about it. Um, you're going to see me making a lot of mistakes and generally doing some things very poorly, but I am trying, so bear with me. Once we get up to altitude and leveled off, in general, it should be more about what we're seeing and where we're going than about avionics and this kind of stuff. With that, I think let's start our first leg. Here we are in the Beechcraft King dual prop. This aircraft is used for commuter service across the state. Don't ask me where exactly, but I do know I've seen it in use. Out ahead of us here is the Chugach Range, just east of Anchorage, Alaska. See it there, nice sunset coming up, beautiful graphics, even in sort of a lower than optimum setting. Um, we're at Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport, preparing to take off on the runway heading east here. I chose Anchorage as our starting point because if you visit Alaska, odds are almost 100% you're going to come through this airport. So it seemed fitting to me that we'd start. Anchorage is the main hub from which you reach anywhere else in Alaska and outside of Alaska, and that's not totally exclusively true, but it's close enough. I think most people's experience are going to feel like that. As far as cities go, Anchorage is not particularly large. Geography-wise, it's got a lot of space that it covers, but only about 300,000 residents. Once we get off the ground, we're going to head south and west and head towards the city of Kenai, which is basically southwest of Anchorage on the Kenai Peninsula. Um, and from there, we'll look at starting our flight scene tour for reals. So with that, let's jump in the cockpit and see if we can get moving here. So here we are. Let's get rolling. If the takeoff is good, I'll go ahead and montage it. If not, I'll see you in the air. So at this stage, the autopilot more or less has control of things, and we're just spinning over South Anchorage here, the Sand Lake area. Here in a second, we've got Fire Island, a bunch of wind turbines out there. You can really see that from the upper hillside on the east side of Anchorage there, and should be leveling off here and should be more or less right next to Ted Stevens International Airport. Should have a good view of that. Out in front of us there, that's Mount Susitna, sometimes called Sleeping Lady. There's Ted Stevens Anchorage International. The Sleeping Lady has an interesting story. In the 60s, a schoolgirl came up with this story that that was attributed to Alaska Native legend, where it was a woman laid down to sleep after her hunter husband went off and never came back. Sadly, it's not actually a myth, but we've adopted it in this area, and it's fun and romantic. So here we are turning over Cook Inlet. Oops, a little bit of goofiness of the camera here. Turning over Cook Inlet towards the Kenai Peninsula, and off to our left there, it's a little bit hard to see. And since our autopilot is engaged, I'm going to go ahead and pop out to the external camera here. I'm going to turn around here. And we're looking up Turnagain Arm here, and this is an interesting place. It's called Turnagain Arm. It's constructed from turn again. It was named when Captain Cook came up in the late 1700s. He came up looking for the Northwest Passage in Alaska, and him and his crew tried to travel up there, and they kept having to turn around again and again because of the severe tides. And the tides are attributed to be the second most severe in the world. I don't know if that's totally accurate, but they are pretty severe. On a windy day, when the wind is blowing down that inlet, it'll actually prevent the water from coming in evenly, and you'll have this 2-foot wave of water being pushed in one direction from the wind and the other direction from the incoming tide. So it's pretty dangerous. The other thing that the sim doesn't really show us here that I'd like to point out is up here in Upper Cook Inlet, there's these tidal flats that just extend for, I don't know if it's miles, certainly hundreds and hundreds of feet out from the shores when there's low tide. This is a severe high tide situation we're looking at. So this is legitimate if you're looking at high tide, but during low tide there's these gray, muddy sandbanks all along here, and they're really quite dangerous. They're sort of like real quicksand. Let's see, turn our attention back to what's going on in front of us here. Everything's looking pretty good. So we're heading south towards over the Kenai Peninsula right in front of us here, and then towards Kenai City. That's where we're going to land today. Off to our right here, we've got the mouth of the Susitna River and Mount Susitna there. Again, this is Upper Cook Inlet, which splits in the north part to the Turnagain Arm back over there. You can see it behind us now, and the Kenai Arm, which kind of goes up that way. We can't quite see it now. So one thing I wanted to point out is that as we come over this, some of the textures are not going to render in super great, but what does render in really well as we fly over it is very, very authentic. It really does look like you're flying over the Kenai Peninsula. I just kind of want to leave this here for a second, just to watch that spin by. That's really very true to what it looks like. Let's do an outside view. Look at that. That's just remarkable. There's what that is. Anchorage behind us, Fire Island off to our left. Keep moving. That Kenai Arm stretching off to the north. Little Susitna River there just off the wingtip, and the big Susitna River now off to the edge of the wingtip. You can see there. Very remarkable. Let's just spin back around. You can kind of see Mount Redoubt Volcano there off to the north, or to the south, I mean. Sorry, off to our right somewhat. Get back in the cockpit here. Take a look back here. It's kind of hidden under our windshield, but that Mount Redoubt volcano is an active volcano, and it does give us some trouble from time to time. Mostly it's just ash plumes and so on. Nothing quite so spectacular as, say, Mount St. Helens explosion, but it does cause trouble for a few days or weeks, as the case might be. I think it's gone off maybe twice that I can remember in the last 40 years, maybe 3 times actually. And then further on, that's Iliamna volcano, and I honestly don't remember if that's active, but it does smoke. It sort of is constantly jetting out steam, and the same is true with Mount Redoubt. If you're driving into Kenai, which you do from the east towards the west, you'll often see a little plume of steam coming out of there. And then there's let's see, I believe here normally you would see, I don't know if they're down here further, I honestly can't remember, but all up in this Cook Inlet area there are oil rigs, and it's. I think I've flown over this several times, and I don't think I've seen them. It seems to me that it would be a strange thing to render in procedurally, but it would have been pretty cool to have seen those. And those oil rigs, they in real life supply much of the natural gas to South Central Alaska, and that's really what we rely on for energy source. Not just our heating, but also our power stations. There's numerous power stations that are all natural gas fired power stations. Go ahead and check out our air traffic control here and see if we're close enough to Kenai yet to ask for a landing. Not quite yet. Not quite yet. I do kind of want to look out this window a little bit here. Now, this isn't really the best aircraft to be flight seeing in, but again, I wanted to try to show something somewhat authentic from what you might get if you're coming off from Anchorage and landing in Kenai. Normally, you might take something more like a Dash 8. That's what I've taken in the past. But I do believe I've seen something real similar to this coming into Kenai's commuter service. And of course, the Dash 8's not available in the Microsoft Flight Simulator. So yeah, Iliamna volcano just up there. You can kind of barely see it. I think as we proceed through this flight sim and the tour, we'll come closer to these to where we can see them a little better and maybe get a sense of how well they've rendered them in. I will say that the flight sim doesn't really do justice to the cragginess of a lot of the mountains up here, but boy, it gets close enough, and the general shape is close enough that it gives you a sense of what you're looking at. Just kind of checking our descent here, making sure we're on track. I'm still letting the autopilot do its thing, over speeding. I see that. Throttle back just a little bit. So again, this is the way these textures are rendered. That this is just really authentic way to look at the Kenai Peninsula, and you'll see this kind of thing all across Alaska, even in the interior and western Alaska and Bristol Bay and stuff. You get a lot of this low muskegee kind of terrain. In this area, it's a lot more trees. In western Alaska, it's more low tundra. It's sometimes knee deep and sometimes ankle deep, depending upon where you're at. I think hiking around Bethel, it's about ankle deep on the whole, but it's really wet. It's surprisingly wet because it's just moss and lichen and that kind of stuff as you're marching through it. Redoubt Volcano coming into much better focus. And when you do drive in, Redoubt, just like I said, it looms over Kenai. You just really see it. A flight simulator, two-dimensional representation, just doesn't do it justice. It's sort of like taking a picture of a big, beautiful moon and getting back a little dot in the middle of your picture. And it's kind of the same thing here. This really is larger than life when you're driving down, and it just really lets itself known. All right, so I've got to kind of focus a little bit on thinking about bringing this thing in for a landing here. Oh, Kenai Muni, there she is. Let's go ahead and dial her up. We can't get a landing scheduled.
Kenai Tower, Beechcraft Alpha Sierra, X-ray Golf Sierra Kilo is 16 miles northeast with uniform to land. Beechcraft Alpha Sierra, X-ray Golf Sierra Kilo Kenai Tower. Fly straight in runway 20 right. Altimeter 29er.9er to wind 250 at tree. Fly straight in runway 20 right, Beechcraft Golf Sierra Kilo.
I recognize I'm coming in a little low here for the waypoints in this pattern entry, but I've done this a bunch of times, and really this is kind of how you want to do it. This makes it easy for me to deal with. Again, not being a pilot, I've kind of try to do my comfort level. I'm going to line up with the runway best I can, and then turn off the autopilot. think we're getting darn close to that, actually, to that lining up. Still got a little ways to go here before I'm quite ready to call it. There we go. About dropping that landing gear. Look at this. It's down in here. Now you can kind of see as we come in, you can almost see the Kenai River over there. And the Kenai River is really an important place for people in this part of the state. There's a lot of fishing of salmon that goes on down here, not just for people who do commercial, that is to say they catch and sell the fish, but also for personal home use. And I'm not talking rod and reel. People go out there with big dip nets and they bring home 25, 30, 50, 75 fish, depending upon the size of their household. And that's what they stock their freezer with. And tens of thousands of people go and do this. And there's, I want to say, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of fish coming up this river every year. And we're talking about the sockeye salmon now. The famous Kenai Kings used to come in here. They're very, very large fish, and their numbers have just really been depleted, and it's not clear why. I mean, I think some overfishing is definitely a factor, but it seems that maybe some environmental factors are at play too, which is a bit of a drag. That was quite the resource for the region. People coming in to catch those great big kings.
Beechcraft Golf Sierra Kilo cleared to land runway 20 right. Wind 250 at tree. Cleared to land runway 20 right. Beechcraft Golf Sierra Kilo.
So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the autopilot and try to take this thing in manually. And I've done this a bunch of times on this particular runway, just in practice. For the most part in this series, I think we're going to be using things like bush planes, like the different Cubs that are available, as well as there's a Icon 85. It's not really a bush plane, but it is a water lander, and it's the only one available in the game. And I do want to do a bunch of water landings, and that one's fairly forgiving. This is, I think, the easiest of the larger aircraft that I've tried to pilot. Part of that is just, I don't know if it's just simplified version or what, but I've had a lot of luck with this. I think a lot of it was beginner's luck, and since I've been trying to practice, I feel like beginner's luck has kind of evaporated a little bit on me. We need to go ahead and get ourselves down a little bit further here. We're doing okay. Kind of looking for those PAPI lights out there, the red and white lights on the right hand side of the runway, which tell me if I'm coming in too high or too low. And honestly, in this sim and this render quality, I'm struggling to see those things. So we're just gonna kind of hope I'm getting close, or I'm doing all right. I think once we get closer, we'll be able to kind of fine tune it somewhat. And this aircraft will land on this runway even from the middle, so there's a lot of leeway here. So again, you can see that Kenai River there off to the left. Big important fishing, and again, that one is full of those gray sandbars I was kind of talking about. You see all the way up in Upper Cook Inlet, and this is really a region I know more about than the rest of Alaska. I think as we continue to go around Alaska, I'll know a lot less and be able to share quite a bit less information about how the geography is. But and that's part of why I started here, is that I know more about it, and it'll be more interesting. But the rest of Alaska will be interesting nevertheless. I know where to go, and I think maybe helping people, if you're interested in flying this sim, maybe flying around Alaska, maybe help you know where to go, or if you just kind of want to see what it looks like up here. This is pretty representative geography. So here we've got, we're coming in a little too high. Let me see if I can't. There we are. Now we're doing better. This is not going to be a perfect landing, I don't think, but it'll be all right. Oops. Ooh. Nobody wants to hear that. There we go. There we go. That wasn't terrible. All right, and we are on the ground. We're going to have some air traffic interruptions, so let's just let that happen for a second while I try to taxi off the runway here.
Beechcraft Golf Sierra Kilo exit runway when able. Beechcraft Golf Sierra Kilo contact ground on 118.75. Going to 118.75 Beechcraft Golf Sierra Kilo.
So rather than bore you with the taxi all the way to general parking, I think I'm going to go ahead and leave this here. So if you enjoyed this or want to see more content, hit the like and subscribe buttons. And I'll be trying to come out with these videos every few days or once a week. And we're going to make our way from South Central Alaska down the Aleutian chain and stopping in all kinds of interesting places along the way. And then back up and across along the coast, that is to say the western coast of Alaska up to the interior and the Arctic, and then down in the interior and then back down in the southeast. It's going to be a whole thing. It's going to be gazillion videos on flying around Alaska. So thinking about next week, we're going to try to hit, or next video, we're going to try to hit Skilac Lake off to our east here using the Icon A5 float plane, not your typical bush plane in Alaska, but it's what we've got, so it's what we're going to use. So again, hit like and subscribe if you want to see more of this, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.